On our broadcast tonight, President Park Geun-hye taps a former Supreme Court justice as prime minister to replace the one who resigned over last month's deadly ferry disaster. Now, she also accepts the resignations of her top security chiefs. Candidates hit the campaign trail in Korea's June 4th local elections. In the wake of last month's ferry disaster, national safety is at the core of campaign pledges. And Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Kun-hee's heart attack has investors thinking about a possible leadership change in the nation's largest family-owned conglomerate. We take a look at the family behind Samsung and the relationship between the affiliates. Early edition begins now.
I see trees of green, red roses.
늘 남편 먼저,
I see them
늘 자식 먼저.
for me and
레이디 퍼스트라는 말을 믿고 살아온 당신. 오늘만큼은 세상 누구보다 당신이 먼저입니다. 한 분 한 분 특별하게 모시겠습니다.
Excellence in Flight, Korean Air.
It is 5 a.m. in New York, 4 p.m. in Bangkok, and 6 p.m. on Thursday, the 22nd of May here in Seoul. This is Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Geon-hye.
I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. It's been more than 3 weeks since Prime Minister Chung Eung-won tendered his resignation over the government's lax response to the Sewol ferry disaster.
And on this Thursday, President Park Geun-hye tapped his replacement, naming An Dae-hee, a former Supreme Court justice, to the post. Arirang's Choi Yoo-sun has the latest out of the presidential office.
President Park Geun-hye has tapped An Dae-hee, a former Supreme Court justice, as the new prime minister. Presidential office spokesperson Min Kyung-wook on Thursday said An's principles and integrity in the Judicial Committee were a key reason for his appointment.
The nominee expected to successfully carry out reforms within the public sector and the government, and to push forward with the government's campaign to root out corruption in our society.
An has a track record of investigating cases of corruption in politics on both sides of the aisle. He made a name for himself in 2003 after looking into allegations that the then-opposition Conservative Party had amassed illegal election funds, and in the same year looked into corruption charges against the aides of then-Liberal President Roh Moo-hyun. The nominee also spearheaded the ruling Saenuri Party's political reforms ahead of the 2012 presidential election. As part of President Park's recent promise of sweeping reforms, she also accepted the resignations of her top presidential security advisor Kim Jang-soo and National Intelligence Service Chief Nam Jae-jun. Earlier on Thursday, President Park called on her senior secretaries to clearly distinguish the roles of the National Security Council and the soon-to-be-established Safety Ministry. The president said the NSC should respond to anything that threatens national security, such as a war or a terror threat, while the Safety Ministry should manage public safety and natural and man-made disasters. She also said the new Safety Minister should take on the role of Special Affairs Minister, who will likely assume authority over the control tower in times of disasters. President Park also urged her aides to make sure that the more than a dozen people still missing from the Sewol ferry accident are found. She then reiterated her commitment to transforming Korea into a safer place to ensure that the more than 300 victims of the ferry tragedy did not die in vain. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
And now on to the latest on the investigation of the deadly ferry accident. Prosecutors are now convinced that the practical owner of the Sewol operator is on the run from authorities. The Incheon District Court granted the prosecution a warrant to detain Yoo Byung-won on this Thursday.
He has failed to show up for questioning on multiple occasions over the past week, and the court said there was a risk of Yoo destroying evidence related to the ferry accident. Today's detention warrant comes a day after authorities searched the religious compound, thinking he was hiding out there. The court has also placed Yoo and his oldest son on the most wanted list and put out an $80,000 reward for information about their whereabouts. Yoo faces a number of charges, including embezzlement and tax evasion.
Hot on the heels of President Park's pledge to shake up the cabinet after the government's poor response to the ferry disaster, the prosecution has announced plans to crack down on the so-called bureaucratic mafias.
The term refers to the practice of government officials taking up jobs related to their duties after retirement, but is seen as fostering too cozy ties between bureaucrats and regulators. For more, here's our Connie Kim.
The prosecution will soon set up 18 special investigation teams across the nation to root out corruption, with a focus of ending collusive ties between government officials and the industries they regulate. The decision was made at an emergency meeting of senior state prosecutors Wednesday afternoon. Prosecutor General Kim Jin-tae said the district public prosecutors' offices will each form special teams charged with stamping out corruption involving civil servants.
Probe must not stop with punishing individuals. We will root out the structural causes of corrupt ties between government and private institutions by changing the mindsets of bureaucrats.
The prosecution will crack down on collusive ties between bureaucrats and the industries and companies they regulate. It's common for retired bureaucrats to be hired by companies and public institutions that expect them to pressure their former colleagues or subordinates to ignore corrupt or irregular practices at the organizations. So-called parachute appointments, which allow public sector officials to get jobs in industries they were once charged with regulating, will also be under probe. Institutions that are tasked with overseeing public infrastructure directly related to safety, including ships, railways, and nuclear power plants, will be looked into with priority. To clamp down on profits made through corrupt practices, prosecutors are proposing a law to confiscate hidden assets amassed by current or former civil servants through bribery and other illicit means. After President Park Geun-hye apologized for the government's poor handling of last month's ferry disaster, which he blamed partly on corruption, prosecutors at the western port city of Incheon raided Lee In-soo, a top official of the Incheon Port Authority. Lee, a former board chairman of the Korea Shipping Association and a retired official of the Oceans Ministry, has been charged with embezzlement. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Campaigning for the June 4th local elections has finally begun here in Korea. But given the sense of grief and sorrow that remains over last month's ferry disaster, campaigns will be noticeably toned down compared to years past. Our Ji Myung-gil brings us scenes from day one on the campaign trail.
Incumbent Seoul Mayor Park Geun-hye of the main opposition party started his campaign by greeting commuters at one of the capital's busiest subway stations in Gangnam on Thursday.
Koreans, especially Seoul citizens, start their hard life from the morning, cramming into subway trains. There is a problem with the quality of people's lives.
The ruling Saenuri Party's Chung Mong-jun, who is challenging Mayor Park, spent part of his first day campaigning at Yeongcheon Traditional Market, trying to connect with the working class.
This market is located in the center of Seoul, with convenient transportation nearby. I will work with local district members to make sure this market is cleaner and more attractive.
Candidates will be making their pledges known in their provinces and cities over the next couple of weeks. Many of them will center around safety as candidates seek to win support from a population disappointed and frustrated with the government's poor handling of the Sewol ferry disaster. The ruling Saenuri Party is adopting an apologetic approach. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is expected to target the government, tapping into the perceived lack in competence in safety management. In the latest polls, the ruling party is lagging behind the main opposition party in key regions such as Seoul and the western port city of Incheon. Ruling party candidates have seen their support crumble in the wake of the ferry accident. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is calling on neighboring countries to build a security framework aimed at countering Washington's influence in the region. But as our Kim Hyun-bin reports, with China mired in territorial disputes with many of the countries it's seeking to partner up with, the prospects for the Chinese leader getting his way don't look too promising.
President Xi Jinping at an international security summit in Shanghai on Wednesday said that the problems facing Asia today should be handled by the nations within Asia.
Asia countries should all cooperate to resolve security issues in the region.
It was a not-so-veiled reference to the U.S. as it seeks to increase its influence in Asia.
A third party aimed at enhancing military alliances in the region does not serve our interests.
Xi made the statements at the 4th Conference on Interaction and Confidence-Building Measures in Asia, a group of more than 20 mostly Asian nations. Xi's vision for a new Asian security concept has a supporter in Russia, which launched joint naval exercises near the disputed East China Sea Islands this week. Russian President Vladimir Putin has already backed the idea, but it may be hard to see it through, as nations will be reticent to harm relations with Washington. Many of them are also mired in territorial disputes with China. Relations between Beijing and Washington have been sour in recent months over accusations of cyber attacks, newly established air defense zones, and territorial disputes in the South China Sea. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
At least 31 people are dead and more than 90 others injured in bombings at a crowded marketplace in northwestern China. Authorities there say unknown attackers crashed 2 cars into shoppers at a market in the Xinjiang region and threw explosives out the window. Now, China's Ministry of Public Security is calling it a terrorist act. Xinjiang has been hit with a number of attacks in recent months, blamed on separatists seeking independence from China.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life, talking with you on air and online, connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gong-yong and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Last month's Sewol ferry accident had a significant impact on domestic consumption, something Korea's finance minister says continues today. Hyun Oh-seok has promised support for businesses that have been hit hard. Our Son Jung-in has more.
Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok, in a meeting Thursday morning with economy-related ministers, said the domestic consumption is slowly moving towards a path of recovery after a decline in demand spurred by last month's ferry accident. However, he added that consumer sentiment is still fragile and promised to work actively to help consumption and corporate investment rebound as quickly as possible. Hyun said the government will closely monitor overall economic trends and provide more support to the sectors hit hardest by the ferry accident, including retailers and transportation and tourism industries. As for overall industrial competitiveness, which is also not seen as strong, he promised to establish measures to boost electronic commerce within the next month to promote foreign investment and make inroads into overseas markets. Local private financial researchers forecast the economy to stay on a moderate recovery path in the latter half of this year. Their average estimate of this year's economic growth rate ranged between 3.9% to 4%, which is similar or slightly lower than the one previously set by the government. They said weakened consumption and a gradual drop in the $1 exchange rate may work as negative factors of this year's economy. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Amid signs that the U.S. economy is gaining steam, the Federal Reserve is discussing how it will begin to raise short-term interest rates that currently stands near zero. The Fed, however, has made clear the rates will stay low in coming months. Our Connie Lee has more.
U.S. Federal Reserve policymakers have begun paving the way for raising short-term interest rates after keeping them near zero for 6 years. The central bank's April meeting minutes revealed Wednesday confirmed the Fed is not ready to normalize monetary policy by starting to hike interest rates anytime soon. But policymakers did engage in prudent planning and looked at several approaches for such steps as a reverse easy monetary policy. Fed Chairwoman Janet Yellen reiterated earlier this month that interest rates would not rise until the U.S. economy was strong enough.
Interest rates are unlikely to begin rising until we are in a strong economic recovery. We eventually will start to raise interest rates. I'm assuming the economy will continue to recover, and at some point that will become appropriate.
As the U.S. economy strengthens, interest rates are expected to rise in the latter half of 2015. Since 2008, the Fed has kept rates at near 0% to help the economy recover from a severe recession. The April meeting minutes also suggest that the Fed will keep reducing its stimulus plan, as leaders say the U.S. economy is on a path of moderate growth. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics has once again been ranked among the 30 most valuable brands in the world.
Not surprising. The brand equity database Brand Z has placed Samsung 29th in its top 100 most valuable global brands list, up one notch from last year and valued at $26 billion. Samsung was the only Korean company to make the list. Google overtook Apple to bounce back as the most valuable global brand with a value of $159 billion. The fastest riser in the list was Chinese portal Tencent, whose value rose 97% over the year. Speaking of Samsung, it's been nearly 2 weeks since the chairman of Samsung Electronics, Lee Kun-hee, was hospitalized after suffering a heart attack. But there hasn't been any news of him recovering consciousness.
Now, the latest health episode of Lee has trained the spotlight on the succession plan in the technology giant and has raised questions in just how long the 72-year-old will be able to remain as a leader of the company he turned into a global one. Well, Arirang's Hwang Ji-hye joins us live to give us a clearer picture. Now, Ji-hye, Samsung has gone from a mass producer of cheap Me Too products, if you will, to a trendsetter in the global tech industry, and at the center of it all stands Lee Kun-hee. So the question is, will Samsung take a major hit without him at the helm?
Well, Geun-hye, in the short term, that's very unlikely, experts say, because there's been a system in place at Samsung for the past 20 years, ever since Chairman Lee successfully introduced the company into the global market. And there's also the fact that Samsung Group is not micromanaged by Lee at this point. But in the long term, experts say Samsung might face challenges in the absence of the business tycoon as he sets up the big picture for the company and can push through dramatic changes within a very short period of time. When Apple came out with the iPhone, it took less than 2 years for Chairman Lee to transform all of Samsung Group and catch up with the rival company's innovation. Now there's a big question mark hovering over the head of heir apparent Lee Jae-yong, Chairman Lee's son, who will have to fill the shoes of his father.
I'm not quite sure if Jae-yong Lee, succeeds his role. He would be able to show that much of a leadership, which will, drive the entire entity to cope with the changes.
Pundits also point to the fact that Jae-yong has no major accomplishments to speak of in the 10 years since he began taking part in management decisions. In fact, in 2000, Jae-yong was leading 14 internet venture companies as the largest shareholder of Samsung. Just 1 year later, all were bankrupt. Yet there's another major hurdle the nation's biggest conglomerate will have to overcome under the new leadership. That is improving the corporate governance, as the Lee family has near absolute control of the entire group while holding tiny stakes in 74 affiliates through a tangled cross-shareholding of companies.
There should be no cross-shareholdings between the non-financial sector and the financial sector. As you know, Samsung Life Insurance is the largest shareholder of Samsung Electronics. That chain must be broken.
The highly complicated web of cross-shareholding has come under fire from shareholder activists. They say it weakens the influence of outside shareholders. With Jae-yong having less respect and less support than his father, experts say investors are likely to speak out over illegal maneuvers that allow the Lee family to maintain its tight grip over the group. And Samsung actually has pledged to break its complicated cross-shareholding practices among affiliates by 2016 and carry out a mass shakeup of its affiliates. Market analysts say the recent mergers of several group affiliates, including Samsung SDI and Tail Industries, fall in line with such goals. Some are even saying that the recent bullish stock prices related to Samsung come from the anticipation of a more transparent governance system.
And yeah, much spotlight is also being put on how the group will restructure itself in terms of leadership. What do we know about the succession plan in relation to Lee's 3 children who have a huge shoe to fill?
Well, Daniel, the big picture of the plan is mostly drawn up, experts say, with many predicting that the electronics and financial sector will be handed over to Lee's only son, Tae-yong, the chemical and hotel sectors to first daughter, Poo-jin, and the fashion and media sectors to second daughters, Hye-hyun. But they add that nothing is for certain when it comes to which affiliate goes to whom, especially regarding the construction sector.
Well, many eyes will be fixed firmly on how the transfer of control is carried out at the conglomerate, whose businesses account for more than 20% of the Korean economy. Well, our Hwang Ji-hye on the future of Samsung Group. Ji-hye, many thanks to you.
Now, while Korea is regarded as an IT powerhouse globally, there are areas in which the nation can improve, namely with regard to research and development.
Right, and with that in mind, a forum with participants from around the globe was held this Thursday to offer some constructive criticism. Our Kim Ji-yeon was there.
The K-Tech Global R&D Forum, supervised by the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy, was a chance to examine the current state of Korea's industrial technology and R&D policies from a global perspective. A senior economist from the OECD, Alistair Nolan, released the agency's latest report on the matter. He says Korea has one of the highest level of university patenting for technology, following Israel and Estonia. But Nolan said the patents are not frequently used by corporations, highlighting a lack of interaction between the business and academic fields.
Time and again, when we talked with industry representatives, the lack of awareness of IP, intellectual property, was considered a problem. They have a mindset which is conditioned, which is shaped by the incentives that they face, because they are rewarded and their universities are rewarded according to the rate of academic citations and patents, but they're not rewarded in terms of or because of their success in commercialization outcomes.
A handful of model policies from the world's leading academic institutions were presented in response. Electrical engineering professor Kim Jong-min of Oxford University says his institution seeks to own all of its intellectual property jointly with its owners so that it can be used by researchers and industry partners.
Some people say they may lose opportunity and money in the short period of time, but in the longer term, they will get more returns as a royalty.
Kim suggested that small and medium-sized companies have a great chance to succeed in the energy sector when collaborating with universities, since it depends on the basic sciences and the convergence of many different types of R&D. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
You know, I wish I had some more interesting things to say, but it was yet another unseasonably warm day here in the nation.
Will it continue? Let's find out by turning to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle?
Good evening, guys. The skies above Korea are very clear with temperatures in the high 20s to low 30s, except in the eastern provinces where it's raining with temperatures in the low 20s. Now, we can expect another warm and sunny day tomorrow, and however, rain is in the forecast on Sunday, which should bring down our highs a bit. Now, and while the weather has been unseasonably warm of late, do keep that in mind. The temperatures drop more than 10 degrees in the mornings and nights. Now, going over to our temperature readings, the morning will start off at 15 before reaching up to 29 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will peak up to 30 and 23 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 25, Dokdo at 20, while Mankumgam tops out at 16. Now as for the weather conditions down in Chindo at the site of the ferry disaster, the wind and tides are very calm, although the fog is getting thicker by an hour. Now dropping the visibility to just about 50 meters. Now that's all I have for tonight. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you guys.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. For our viewers in Korea, have a wonderful rest of the evening. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Moon Gun-young. To those of you in other parts of the world, have a great start to your day, and we hope to see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Take care.